As he says, the fundamentals are well known, but the friends need greatly to study the more profound works if they want these higher characteristics. So they're not in dispute. They are harmonious. And that's what makes us look a little strange, because we live by fundamentals. We don't drink alcohol. We don't have sex outside of marriage. A variety of things that we live that are very fundamental. But that just gives us the freedom to really soar in the spiritual realms and think very different, because we're not worried about, we know what to do on our daily behavior. It's interesting. It makes life more simple, and we can focus more on the greater things of life. Moving on.
So now we move to the Islamic stage, or the Valley of Contentment, with the concept of understanding. And here we have the spirit of submission, and we become introduced to divine unity, living in praise of God, wisdom and understanding, and a prayerful praising of God.
This is the one that is perhaps the least understood, particularly because right now the Islamic world is in chaos. But I suggest to you that if you were to look more clearly with the spiritual eye, you would see the beauty that is in the Quranic verses and truths. But for example, for the first time, Muhammad taught there was validity in the Christian religion, there was validity in the Jewish faith, there was validity in Abraham, there was validity in Adam. It was actually Muhammad who taught first that Adam was a prophet. So we've learned that what he came to do is say, okay, Christ introduced the idea of an invisible reality called the kingdom. I suggest to you that Muhammad gave us a guided tour. He pointed out how things really work, how God has a system that is beautiful, that we can trust it, that we can live in a sense of submission to his will, and all things will work to the good. He united, for example, in the Christian world, they had thought that knowledge of anyone not a Christian was of no value. Therefore, the Greeks had nothing to say. The Indians had nothing to say. They banned the reading of non-Christian works. It caused the Dark Ages. We went into a tailspin of ignorance, and quite savage things happened. When Muhammad came, he introduced the concept that knowledge is beautiful, wonderful, a ladder unto God. And that knowledge, even from a heathen, is worth embracing if it's true. The truth could be among the heathens too. It was a revolutionary way of thinking at the time. He founded the first universities. They translated the Greek writings into Arabic. They translated much of the Indian wisdom into Arabic. They discovered the mathematics of the zero from the Indian people. They introduced a whole new system of mathematics, algebra. But the first universities where knowledge was gathered at a specific place where the wise gathered and shared their knowledge with the young took place under Islam. It later on was adopted in the Western world in the time when Islam began to come into Europe, particularly through Italy. That's a whole different story. But our culture has tried to keep this out of our consciousness, how indebted we are to the Islamic world for the modern world that we today have. Yes, they've fallen back for a variety of reasons. They did not keep pace. We took what they learned and we built on it, and we have some wonderful things. But even the idea of the wonderful Western idea of equality and justice, but that all men are equal and endowed with inalienable rights, that actually comes from Islam. Because in the Islamic Brotherhood, a king and a beggar could bow down to God side by side in the mosque. No one was better than the other while bowing down before God in the mosque. Outside the mosque, they could take their different places. But in the true brotherhood of the Spirit, they were one. Oh, how far we've fallen from that beautiful idea. At the same time, it was adopted in the American culture through the Masonic movement that brought this to our attention, because George Washington and many of the early founders like Franklin, they were members of the Masonic movement, which was truly a secret organization that had learned much of its wisdom from Islam from the past. They didn't know that, but that's what was going on. That, again, is for another time to discuss. Moving on, if we gain the wisdom of this broad way of looking at things, where God is the author of all things being beautiful, nothing is evil in itself. Only the abuse and misuse of good creates evil. And if you think about it in any way, you can't think of something that's literally evil. You can only think of our usage or our application of something. We use it for evil or to harm, to do negative. It's like atomic energy. It can do wonderful things, or it can destroy us all. There's a reason for everything, but within limits. And when we don't have limits, sometimes things can get out of hand and all kinds of terrible things take place. Anyway, moving on.
So we move to the Baha'i stage, the valley of wonderment, the concept of certitude. This is the spirit of the dawn breakers, saintly, selfless certitude, remembrance and presence of God, becoming a hollow reed, announcement of kingdom on earth.
This is what age we are now approaching and in fact involved in. We have to let go of our past attachments. We have to become selfless and certain in what's right for this time, this age. We have to have a sense that God is with us and God is guiding us to correct the problems of the past, to restructure the future, and to trust that God will send the guidance needed to carry out changing this world into a rose garden. We are not meant to live in pain and sorrows of war and poverty. And we have the tools now in the modern world. God has poured out his knowledge. It says in the Bible, I will pour out knowledge upon the earth like the water covers the sea. I can tell you right now, all of us know here, we're familiar with the internet, we are drowning in knowledge. It's what to do with it and where we're going to put the will that's going to make the difference. So that we have to remember that God is the guide, God is the inspiration for how to use what we have, but we have to also let go of self-interest being the guiding force. We got to let go of that last vestige of the insistent self so that we can become creative. When we let go, something about us opens up and a power of creativity comes through. And we can actually bring into existence that which has never been before. And the evidence of that is all around us. But if you hang on too strongly to the past, it interferes with your ability to launch into the future. And that's why it's a break. It's respect for the past. And that's what we're doing here. We're respecting, we're honoring what's been done. But it's time to step up to the plate and let the power of God guide us. But in order to have that, we have to have a right attitude. We have to let go. And know and trust that we actually can change this world into a beautiful garden. That to be born in this world of the future will be nothing but a joy for a child to come into.